Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of my Snowrunner tutorial series. In today's episode, we are going to learn how to position the light bulbs that appear in the game, along with learning how to export and position add-ons, as in like front bumpers, rear bumpers, snorkels, pretty much any extra add-on part that you want on your truck. So let's jump right into how I go about putting in the lights and finding their locations. So what I'll do is come into Blender and find the light that I want to find the location of, in which case it would be these marker lights, which I separated out as their own entity. So what I'll do is go into edit mode, and we'll start with the front one, but we'll also do the side one because it's shaped a little differently. Um, so for the front one, these are pretty easy. What I'll do is choose two vertices. If there is not an edge that runs through the center of it, what we can do is pick two edge vertices and subdivide, and that'll give us a clear edge there. Um, that will give us a clear location as far as where the middle is. And what we can then do is pick two on the other side, pick these two and join them together, and that'll give us one right in the middle. So, since this one already had just to kind of show if yours already has some kind of division, you can just subdivide that and you'll basically find the middle. And what I'll do is come up to this little pull-out window and pull that out. And what that does, it actually gives us the location of that particular vertex right here. So what we can do is go into our XML file, find the lights, the area with all the lights in it, model attachments. Stop signals are going to be all your stop lights. Ignition, these are the ones that are going to turn on when you start the truck. Light is actual, like a pool of light that appears on the ground. Flares are the small bulbs that you see when the truck is running and when the truck is lit up. So right now, since this model was so much bigger than the original, you can't really see them. I was hoping that we could actually see where they were, but we will move them so we can see where they are. So what I'll do is I'll usually try to position my window so I can still see where these are. And these don't look like my normal orange. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we want to change the color of it. These are going to be fairly white, and we want them to be orange. So we're going to go with 255, 165, 0. And you can always go to Google and just type in the name of the color, like orange or white or whatever, and then type in RGB value after the name of the color. And it'll pretty much give you a real easy way to find which numbers to put in for the color. You could also use a paint program and get real fine tuned as to what type of color you want. And most paint programs will give you the RGB value, but I just use Google. It's fairly simple. So next we're going to want to move the position of this light. And there's a little difference between how Blender reads its XYZ coordinates and how say the game and Saber run their XYZ coordinates. These guys actually go X, Z, Y, and not X, Y, Z. So, our first one is X, which is the front to back on the truck. So, this is the X, this red line here. X is front to back. So, what we're going to do is come over here and plug that number into this position, 2.7098. And then remember I said the next one is up and down. Up and down in Blender is the Z axis. So up and down for Z, it's going to be 1.1423. And then left to right is the Y axis in Blender, and that is going to be 0.768. So I'm going to save that. We're going to come back into the game. We're going to reload here. And then we are going to start the truck. And now we can see that light. That's the light we just placed in with this one orange light. So, and then shrink that down, and we should be able to, if our truck is perfectly centered, we should be able to copy the same numbers up and down and front to back, 4, 2, 3, and 7, 6, 8, 9. But we leave this one negative, and that will put it on the opposite side of the truck. So we'll save again, come back in, reload. And we'll see our truck is not perfectly turned. This passenger side is actually sticking out a little further, which leads me to believe that in here, this is probably off by fractions of a degree. It's just enough that that light is slightly more forward than this light. That's not a big deal. We'll just do the same thing we did before. Subdivide. Oh, I did not pick correct. That one. Subdivide it. That'll give us that location, and we'll come back in and -6. It looks to be exactly where it's supposed to be. I'm not sure why it's not showing up. If I compare these three numbers, they all match what that. Oh, I didn't change the color. That's why it looks washed out. I thought the light bulb was actually inside the truck a little bit because it looked so washed out, but now I realize I forgot to change the color to match the other side. So let's reload that. See, it looks very washed out. I thought it was actually inside the truck a little bit. That's much better. So now we have our two parking lights, and whenever you start or stop the truck, they can turn on and off. That's what the ignition section does. The other part would be to do these pools of light that appear on the ground. We can do that, and I can show you real quick what that looks like. So these are not as critical as far as placement goes. 1.14. And 6. That'll be good. Save that. Back in here. Reload. Change the time of day to night so we can see it better. Truck. And this is the pool of light that I'm talking about right here. This light, I just programmed it in, so this section, this light now appears to be giving off light on the ground, and that is done by this section. If I comment this out, that way it's hidden from the game. The game no longer reads it because it's just a comment. Just to demonstrate. So if you notice, this side disappeared because I had this at 0.76. Remove the comments, put it back, you'll see light appear on this side of the truck. Now we have that light on the ground. So that's what the light tags do, is they create these reflections of light on the ground, whereas the flares are the actual bulbs. And you can do that same technique all the way around the truck. Choose like your headlights. This is great because it already has a vertex right in the center. Come back over into the rear. The tail lights might be a little more difficult, but again, there's a nice line running straight through, so you can subdivide it and get that center point. You could do that with the reverse light down here and this tail light up here, and you can just add as many flares as you think is necessary. The other thing we can do is the direction angle, is what angles the light is able to be viewed from. So for most of them, 90 degrees is perfectly fine. It'll basically give you 45 degrees in this direction and then 45 degrees in this direction. However, for something like if you had a side light that's here, you might want to increase that to say 120 or 130 degrees. So when you're panning around the truck, it's more visible from a bigger range of, from a wider range of view. The other part is the direction itself. And it follows the same pattern of front to back, up and down, left and right. So putting a 1 here is going to face that light directly forward. Putting a -1 is going to put that light directly backwards towards the back of the truck. Up and down, having a 0 leaves it perfectly normal, like it's just neutral. If you put a 1 in, it's going to face straight up. If you put a -1, it's going to shine straight down. And then same thing with the left to right. If you put a 1 in there, it's going to shine to the left. If you put a -1, it's going to shine to the right. 0 means it's just there. So if we were to put a 1 and a 1, it's going to try to shine directly forward, but it's also going to try to shine directly right. Therefore, it's going to divide the two and actually shine at a 45-degree angle. I know that sounds very confusing, but basically, if I were to put a 1 into the front, which is there, it shines directly this way. If I put a 1 into the side, it's going to try to shine this way. But since there's already something here, it's going to actually shine 45 degrees and shine at an angle. So you can kind of manipulate those three and get different angles from it. If you wanted it to shine up at a 45, you could put a 1 into the middle section, and so on. Basically, just keep playing with these 1s and 0s, and eventually you'll find the angle that you want. Typically, most lights are just front, back, side to side, and that's it. There's no real up and down. Maybe you might have a flare for a different add-on or something else that you might need those angles. So it's good to know that you can do that. Same with the size as well. The size dictates how big those bulbs are. The larger you put in, the larger the bulb appears. For something like a headlight, you definitely want to go much larger. You want to make it bigger to try to fill that and make it look more realistic. For smaller lights like these marker lights, having just the smaller size is perfectly fine. So let's move into how to do add-ons. Now I noticed the last time I exported this Jeep, I accidentally put the front and rear bumpers on there, which we don't want as part of the Jeep. We want them to be separate. So what I did was I actually went ahead and built a second set of front and rear bumpers, just so we can have some variety to this truck. So what I'm going to do is leave edit mode. We're going to come into object mode. First thing I need to do is turn off these two bumpers, so there's no bumpers. Turn our root node back on. Turn our CDT for our body back on. So now we have all of that stuff. Select all. Apply all transforms just in case. I'm going to export this. Documents, my game, Snowrunner, media, mods, and the tutorial truck. Meshes, trucks. Rewrite that with selected objects, armature, mesh. Apply our transform. Okay. To reconvert this, which is here. That's going to remove these bumpers from the truck, and we're going to turn them into add-on parts, so that way there we can swap between them and they're not fused to the truck. So close that. Now we don't have the front bumper anymore, and we no longer have a rear bumper. Okay, so all add-on parts need their own CDT, their own collision box. So typically what I will do is I will grab, we're going to hide this just so we can see what we're doing. What I'll do is I'll grab that bumper and I'll duplicate it so we have a second one. Except I moved it accidentally and we don't want to move it. So we'll delete that. We'll try this again. Typically when I use Shift and D to duplicate, it asks you if you want to move it. So I have a cursor now that says, hey, let's move this. And if I just click without moving anything, it's in the exact same spot that the other bumper was in. So now we have two direct copies of this bumper. What we'll do is we'll rename the second one CDT underscore F bump 1. As long as it's CDT and underscore, it doesn't matter what you put after it. I just like to put the same name. That way there, I know those two pieces go together. So we can hide those two. And here's my second bumper that I made. It's kind of based off of a real life bumper that I found online that was on a Jeep. So we will Shift D, create a second one, rename that one CDT underscore F bump 2. Do the same thing for the rear bumpers. Select one, D, and CDT R bump 1. D, click CDT R bump 2. Okay, so now we have two front bumpers and two rear bumpers. So what we need to do is activate the CDT and that, and we are going to file. You have to make sure you grab both items at the same time so they both export as one object. Export FBX, and I did not put an add-ons folder in here. So let's create a new folder. Add-ons. We're going to put this in here. We're going to call it F bump 1 and export. we'll do the same thing with F bump 2. Oop, we want to use control and do that. File export FBX F bump 2. File export FBX R bump 1. File export FBX R bump 2. Okay, so now we have all of our bumpers as add-ons in there. So what we'll do is we'll come into this section, and we're in classes at the moment. We want to be in meshes, trucks. And what I always end up doing is I will go into these files, and every mesh needs an XML. So I'll just grab one of these and copy it. So I'll grab one of those files and copy it. And then I'll come back to my add-ons folder, paste it, and rename it fbump1. Take that file. Oops, I didn't want to cut it. Paste. We want to copy that again, and then paste, paste, paste. F2 R bump 1. Remember, they have to be named identical. R bump 2. Now, this is going to have all the textures for that add-on that we took it from, which is fine. That doesn't matter at this moment in time because these add-ons don't have any textures applied to them. We'll take care of that later in a different episode. We're just trying to get them to show up in the game right now. So the first step is to make sure that they have their XML file that matches the mesh FBX file. Now that we have that, we can go back and go into classes, trucks, and I'm going to go into the tuning, and there's already a bumper file here. So I'm just going to grab that bumper file, copy it, go back into trucks, and we'll go into add-ons, and we're going to paste that file in here. And we're going to call this fbump1. Now, when we come in, this is everything that has to do with that particular bumper. So this tells the game where to find the mesh for that bumper. So we're going to want to go to add-ons, fbump1. Mass is how much the bumper weighs. We'll keep it light for now. This is the camera preset when you're in the garage applying the add-on. Hoods is perfectly fine for a front bumper. Category, bumper. Makes sense. This is the price when you're purchasing the bumper. This is the description, and these are calling out to stock files that come in the game. We don't want that. We want our own custom stuff. So stock front bumper. That's the description of it, and this is the name that appears in the garage. Stock front bumper. And then this is the socket that it gets installed to. So this is going to be tutorial F bump. In fact, I'm going to abbreviate that a little bit, and we'll just call it tut F bump. So we'll save that. And then we will need to come into the main truck XML file, and we have to use add-on sockets. So we're going to add-on socket. Toot F bump. One thing I realized was I named the socket F bump. So we have to make sure that these two match. So we have the socket name equals that, and offset equals quote 0 semicolon 0 semicolon 0. That allows us, if we had to, we could change the position. Same thing with any of these other positions. It's just called offset rather than position. And we close that socket. In fact, we could close it that way, or we could close it this way. Remove that. It's a little less work that way. Okay. So next up, we're going to need another file. That's going to be for fbump2. Each add-on needs its own classes because you're going to be calling out the mesh that is the 3D model that is represented in the game. So we want fbump2. We're going to want to change the description. Steel rail. And then we're going to keep that same install socket there. So F2. Now we should be able to save this. Okay, I figured out my mistake. Forgot the parentheses around the offset. So now if we save that, back in here, reload this, apply that change, come into the garage, we have our two front bumpers. So what we can do is spin around to the front, and we can install the first one, or we can install the second one. The meshes are messed up on that right now, but it doesn't matter. So, well, now one thing we would want to do is have this stock front bumper automatically appear when the truck is purchased. So that one's automatically installed. And to do that, in here we put default add-on equals name fbump1. And that will give us a default for that first bumper. We can still uninstall it and put the next bumper on, but that one will automatically come with the when we purchase the truck. So what we can do is then copy this whole thing, Control V, and we're going to go R bump 1, and make a rear bumper socket. We can then go back into here and we'll copy these. Actually, I'm going to copy only going to do one for right now. One. We'll go into it. We're going to change that. We don't want it to be in the same category as the front bumpers, so we're going to go rear bumper, and we want to use the rear camera. Stock rear bumper, and we're going to use that rear socket. So toot our bump. Save that. We can go back to here, and now that we have all those parameters done, paste our bump 2, come back into it and change the mesh, and I don't remember what that bumper looks like off the top of my head. I've made quite a few bumpers. Okay, so that one's going to actually have a rear tire carrier, which we do need to model the rear tire for it. For the moment, we can stock rear bumper with rear tire. Okay. So now what we can do is come back into here and reload. And we should see the 2 rear bumpers pop up. So now we have the rear bumper. And if we remove this truck, remember before it spawned in with no bumpers on it, but now that we've set those defaults, notice it comes in with the bumpers. Look, and we have the front bumpers, and if you look, that's the name that I typed in, and that's the description. Rear bumper with tire, stock rear bumper with spare tire. So again, the UI description is this smaller yellow text, the name is the larger text, and then we also did the same thing with the front bumper. Having those, the mesh on this one looking really odd like that brings up another really good point in Blender that I hadn't thought of, and that is face orientation. We can adjust that real quick. So what we'll do is come into this front bumper. If you look, it looks perfectly fine right here. However, it's parts of it are inside out, and that's because of the way I built it and mirrored things. So what we can do is go into, select it, go into edit mode. We'll come in here and look at face orientation, and anything red is see-through, it's backwards. So what I'll do is I'll select all, mesh, normals, recalculate outside, and almost everything's blue. We still have one face right there. So we'll select that face. Kind of take a look. Yep. Mesh, normals, flip it. Now it's perfectly fine. We'll come back in, turn on the CDT, we'll select the both of them. And it's okay if the CDT is still inside out. It's invisible in the game anyway. So export FBX, F2, export. And unfortunately, you cannot reload anything in the garage. Something we've been asking for quite a while. The ability to reload and redo things while you're in the garage. Unfortunately, you have to come back out of the garage. There it's reconverted. And we see now it looks normal, the way it's supposed to. Okay, so that is a basic crash course in how to create add-ons within the game and how to set your light positions. In the next episode, we'll start looking at texturing and how to set texture files and actually give some color to this. So again, I hope you learned something, and I hope I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks.